The president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, asked the dissidents of the FARC for a cessation of hostilities rather than a ceasefire. The Russian chief of diplomacy, Sergei Lavrov, accused Brussels and Washington of recklessly increasing the threat of a direct clash of nuclear powers. In northern India, heavy rains have already killed more than 50 people in the state of Himachal Pradesh. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, in this RG News. On Monday, from the southwest of the country, the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, asked the dissidents of the FARC for a cessation of hostilities rather than a ceasefire. From the department of Cauca, where he attended an extraordinary security council precisely due to the violent actions of the dissidents known as the Central General Staff, commanded by the AKA Ivan Mordisco, the head of state demanded a gesture that will bring relief to the communities of the zone from the harsh living conditions imposed on them by the armed attacks. Petro has stressed in different scenarios that the government's main condition for advancing total peace is that any group that agrees to dialogue with the state must leave out any action that impacts the civilian population. And precisely on Monday, the fourth round of talks between the Colombian government and the ELN started in Caracas. Both delegations will review the bilateral ceasefire that came into effect on August the 3rd, the longest ceasefire agreed with this insurgent group. Both sides will highlight the progress made so far, especially regarding the ceasefire and the setup of the National Participation Committee. In that regard, the delegations have emphasized that both and the ceasefire, including the implementation of its monitoring and verification mechanism, have led to this resumption of the dialogues.
We think that if we expect that what we signed here be implemented, that in itself proves that there is a commitment to achieve a political resolution to the conflict. This roundtable in November has been signing a series of agreements under the logic that what is agreed upon and signed be implemented.
And the head of the Colombian peace delegation, Ori Patiño, announced the start of the fourth round of talks and assured that the peace with the National Liberation Army will contribute to the construction of a democratic state.
We are beginning a new cycle of talks. The first was right here in Venezuela, and in it we consolidate the principle that peace is an issue that transcends armed organizations and governments. It is a matter for the state and involves the institution and society in general. From this perspective, the peace that we are making with the National Liberation Army, the last rebel political organization of those that emerged in the revolutionary hurricane of the 1960s, must contribute to the construction of a state with full democracy.
And also, during the inauguration of the fourth cycle of talks in the National Delegation of Colombia and the National Liberation Army, the Executive Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, stressed that Venezuela relentlessly supports the total peace policies of the government of President Gustavo Petro.
Well, we want to highlight in this fourth cycle, and I have heard it from both sides, that it's very important to adopt humanitarian relief measures for the communities that have been impacted by this armed conflict. I believe that it becomes a humanitarian objective, an objective that cannot be postponed, in an urgent objective that must be addressed to impact and reduce the effects of the armed conflict, especially in the communities that have seen their right to develop really affected as a result of the conflict. Venezuela, as a guarantor country, support all of its possibilities without rest, the total peace policies of President Gustavo Petro and the government of President Gustavo Petro, that it can lead us to the right path for a lasting peace, a peace that really feels the people as their own and that can keep away this path from the enemies of peace.
Let's move on now to other topics. In the Dominican Republic, at least 12 people died, 64 were injured, and about 55 are still missing after an explosion at a shopping mall in the town of San Cristobal. According to local media, the incident took place in a plastics factory of Padre Ayala Street near the Central Park. For their part, the authorities work in the place to put out the fire and start an investigation process, which so far it is speculated that it is a gasoline explosion or a fuel tanker truck. Also, those affected are being assisted at the San Cristobal clinic, with the death toll likely to rise. Let's move on to Haiti. There, the funeral of the former provisional president of Haiti, Boniface Alexander, who assumed the leadership of the country after the second coup d'etat against Jean-Bertrand Aristide, took place. The national funeral was held in the morning hours at the Court of Cassation. The ceremony counted with the participation of high government authorities and a heartfelt tribute to what some experts described as the great servant of the state. Alexandre, a lawyer and jurist, served as president of the nation from 2004 to 2006. After the second coup d'etat against Jean-Bernard Aristide, he organized the elections that gave the victory to René Préval. During the government of Jovenel Moïse, he led the commission that submitted a proposal for constitutional reform. Now we move on to other topics. This Monday in Guatemala, the departments of Huehuetenango, Izabal y Totonicapán received the electoral boxes for the second round of the elections scheduled for August 20th. The Supreme Electoral Court, the TSE, shared several images on its socials showing the reception of boxes containing the supplies to be used on the second round of the elections. According to the court, over 3,000 electoral boxes were taken to the departmental electoral boards in each jurisdiction in order to ensure fulfillment of security measures. The president of the departmental electoral board, Minor Ochoa Sea, informed that all the material will be delivered overland. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will be able to find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other studies coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Argentina, the central bank recorded an 18.3% devaluation of the peso after the victory of the opposition party led by Javier Milei in Sunday's primaries. After the central bank's decision, the dollar jumped 62.65% in an official quotation, an advance of 21.8% with respect to last Friday's close. In this sense, dollar-denominated bonds and Argentine stocks on Wall Street fell by an average of more than 10%, while the leading index in the Buenos Aires Stock Exchange fell 0.3%. This comes after Javier Milei pointed out that it is feasible to implement dollarization in the country, in spite of the scarcity of dollars in the nation. In Mexico, authorities said on Monday they found 13 dismembered bodies in freezers in a Mexican region racked by drug cartel-related violence. Prosecutor Veronica Hernandez informed that 6 suspects were detained after the grisly discovery in the city of Poza Rica. The discovery was made on Sunday as police chased a suspect who hid in a building where 3 kidnapped victims were held. Veracruz is one of Mexico's most violent regions due to fighting between rival gangs for control of lucrative drug trafficking routes to the United States, and the Latin American nation has recorded more than 44,000 murders since the launch of a controversial military anti-drug offensive in 2006.
I can inform that respective investigations have been opened in the case of human remains that were found inside freezers in 2 properties in the city of Poza Rica. Initial indications are that unfortunately there could be more than 13 bodies, with the likelihood that others are in the process of being identified. I can also confirm that 6 people have been detained who are probably linked to these events. Prosecutors, experts, and ministerial police are carrying out the corresponding investigations on the basis of the evidence found in both properties.
Now we move on to other topics. The Mexican Foreign Minister Alicia Bárcena met with the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Jake Sullivan to discuss the immigration crisis. In her first visit to the United States, the foreign minister expressed concern over the placement of the wall of buoys along the Rio Bravo. In this regard, she welcomed the U.S. Justice Department's demand against the Texas state government for displacement, since this represents a measure that violates the sovereignty of both countries. Bárcena also held a meeting with the director of Pajo de Wu, Harbas Barbosa, as part of the international meeting of Forma CO Vigilance of the Americas, of the Regulatory Agency for Drugs and Medical Devices of Latin America and the Caribbean. And now we address other topics. In Russia, on Tuesday, the chief of diplomacy, Sergei Lavrov, accused Brussels and Washington of irresponsibly increasing the threat of a direct clash of nuclear powers. During his speech at the International Security Conference being held in Moscow, attended by representatives of more than 100 countries, the Chancellor assured that NATO, the European Union, and the White House, in order to save their project of division of the world and containment of Russia, send large quantities of weapons to Ukraine without any kind of control or regulations, so the armament spreads all over the world. He also said that all the warnings sent by Russia about the nuclear risk are ignored and seriously misrepresented. On Tuesday, and during the 11th Conference on International Security organized by the Ministry of Defense in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin affirmed that the new multipolar world is emerging, with countries ready to defend their sovereignty, security, and national interests. The head of state affirmed that this reality emerges as an important basis for the consolidation of a stable and progressive world development. He did not avoid making reference to the governments of some nations that generate and promote conflicts, divide brotherly countries, and fight to continue with neo-colonial systems to exploit the resources of sovereign nations. We have a final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Tuesday, 2 Palestinian youths, one of them a minor, were shot dead by Israeli occupying forces in a refugee camp near Jericho. Mohammed Nujum, 25, and Kozai al-Walaji, 16, were killed by live ammunition in Aqabat Jabir refugee camp. With these fatalities, the number of Palestinians killed by the occupying forces in 2023 reaches 169. The Palestinian Health Ministry confirmed the deaths, while the Prisoner Society reported in the same raid operation the arrest of at least 10 more Palestinians, 2 of them fishermen. The raid occurred hours after a summit of Egypt, Palestine, and Jordan on possible strategies for ending the occupation. Tensions have been running high in the occupied West Bank in recent months amid repeated Israeli incursions into Palestinian towns and cities. And on Monday, the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi welcomed the Palestinian and Jordanian allies. Al-Sisi met with King Abdullah II of Jordan and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the northern coastal city of El Alamein. During a tripartite meeting, the leaders discussed the development of the Palestinian cause and expressed their support for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with East Jerusalem as the future Palestinian capital. The summit was held to discuss U.S. efforts to achieve normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel and the Palestinian Authority's requirements in the framework of the signing of such a deal. Egypt was the first Arab country to normalize the ties with Israel in 1979, followed by Jordan in 1994. Both countries are key allies of Saudi Arabia. And the Syrian government denounced a terrorist attack worshippers at the religious mausoleum of Shah Chirac in the city of Shiraz, southern Iran. The perpetrators of the attack that left at least one person dead and 8 others seriously injured is attributed to the Daesh group. For this reason, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs indicated that it rejects the criminal act where innocent citizens, including children and the elderly, are killed, and that unsuccessfully seek to undermine the security and stability of the nation. Likewise, it questioned the silence of the countries that claim to defend human rights but refuse to react to these criminal actions. On Monday, at least 3 people were killed and 7 injured in Afghanistan after an explosion ripped through a hotel in the eastern province of Khost. Khost police spokesperson Mustaqifir Kurbas said the hotel was frequented by Afghans and refugees from the former militant stronghold of Waristan in the north of the country. Authorities are investigating the circumstances that caused the detonation, as well as those responsible for the attack. The Taliban government blamed those responsible and the regional branch of the self-styled Islamic State in the province of Khorasan for this incident, due to the previous attacks.
The blast was in a hotel. It is not clear what kind of blast it was. 3 people were martyred and 7 people were wounded. The wounded have been transported to the hospitals and are under medical treatment.
Now we move on to other topics. In northern India, heavy rains have already killed more than 50 people in the state of Himachal Pradesh. Regional authorities warn that the death toll, currently at 55, could rise as the number of missing persons is still high. The heavy rains, which have caused numerous landslides and the closure of more than 700 roads to avoid major disasters, have forced the authorities to suspend learning activities and reinforce assistance in the most unstable areas. The Meteorological Department of India assures that very heavy monsoon rains are being experienced and recommends maintaining the red alert. And health authorities in Bangladesh report at least 352 fatalities due to a new dengue fever outbreak, a great milestone for the Asian nation. The daily disease bulletin issued by the Directorate General of the Health Services on August 9th reported over 2,844 new cases in 24 hours in Dhaka city alone and an additional 1,762 in other parts of the country. Statistics also show that 75,069 infections have been reported since January. Monsoon rains wreaking havoc in Bangladesh this week, which have already claimed 7 lives, could aggravate the outbreak of febrile disease as the monsoon season coincides with dengue rise every year. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.